Alright guys, we are back with the blue truck here on another portion of the 47RE swap. Today we're going to be doing some of what people question about how to control the 47 and make it shift. I've already cleaned up some wiring down there, got rid of a bunch of the Jesus clips that were in for a trailer brake, and just cleaned up the wiring on the side of the frame. So now we're going to roll into the transmission harness and putting in our Firepunk Anteater. And this is kind of what makes the world go around with this swap, because you have to have this in order to run a 47RE in a first gen, because a first gen cannot control a 47RE on its own. It's electrically controlled. So most are worried about adding more electronics to a first gen, which I'm going to be doing a fusible link delete. So all this will be cleaned up, and you just have to have good sources of power, and there's really not much to this. So here's your control box, and then here is what goes down to the transmission. You literally just have your 8-pin that plugs in to the top of the transmission at the valve body, and then you have your speed sensor that plugs into the transmission itself. So you are not sacrificing anything with the factory speedometer by unplugging it, because the factory speedometer is in the transfer case. So you'll be able to maintain your speedometer on your dash, and then the anteater will be able to read the speedometer it needs to see for shifting and whatnot. This connection right here plugs into your anteater. The purple wires coming out the side are for the tap shift. I will show you guys how I'm going to do the tap shift whenever we get around to that. That'll probably be a separate video. And then you've also obviously got your wires. There's going to be a power and a ground, and then you're going to have a TPS wire. So that's another big question: is first gen TPS sucks? So what are you going to go around to make that function as it should? And essentially, all I'm going to do is get a first gen TPS and just try and make it work. If it doesn't, I'm going to try a 98.5 to 04 TPS and see if that will work. I'm just going to see what works best, really. So you guys will have to stick along to see that part of the progress, but we're going to go ahead and wire this bad boy up. Really just try and make our whole trans harness look clean. Alright, I want to show you guys what I'm doing. So we've got our whole harness here for what the original transmission was. All of what I have in my hands right here, we don't need anymore. It was some old, like a transmission line temperature sensor, and then maybe something else, I'm not sure what it was, and then the T-case sensor, the four-wheel drive sensor. Don't need any of that. I pulled my neutral safety wires, if it'll focus, pulled those out of it, and I pulled my my factory speed sensor wires out of it. So got those both strung right here. I'll loom them up, and I had to repin this connector because my old connector had seen much better days. This thing isn't focusing very good today, but you get the idea. The connector was pretty well toast. As far as the clip on it, it was no good. So I went and got a connector. The oil pressure sensor is the same connector. Good lord. Okay, oil pressure sensor is the same connector. So all I did was go to the harness on the shorty, because none of that's being used, and I just cut the pigtail out of there, and it plugs right in. Works great, and the clip's good. So I want a good connection here on the speed sensor, because nothing drives me more crazy than a non-working speedometer. So we've got that. We're going to splice that in, but before we do that, we got to put loom on everything. So a little bit here, which I don't think I'll use that. I'll use the actual loom that's not split loom. We're going to put the anteater stuff and everything in one harness, so you won't see the split up wires. It won't be two separate harnesses. It'll be one big one. I might shorten this, the speed sensor, harness on the Anteater because, I don't know, it's just way too, it's longer than what I want it to be. I want everything to be very clean and tidy. I might leave it alone and run the harness up around there and put a zip tie, the Christmas tree with a zip tie around them going into the mounts up here, so that'll kind of tuck it up. So we might just not shorten it, we'll see, but basically just tidying up wiring, making things look nice. You guys can see from earlier that this already looks way better. There's not just clusters of stuff. It's pinned up to the frame. We got everything in the loom and all the Jesus clips out. We call them Jesus clips here at the shop because it's, you're using them and you're just saying, God, I hope this works, because they are worthless. But I'm going to continue to go to the wiring portion. The wires that we are not going to be using, I'm going to cut down here, but whenever I get back on the top side of the truck, I'm going to pull them out so they're not just a bunch of ends that are cut off, but still receiving whatever it may be, 5-volt power or 12-volt power, just so nothing happens. I'm going to try and do it the proper way. But I'm gonna keep some of these pigtails because they're very common on these trucks. I might need them on another broken clip or something. So that is what we're gonna move on to. All right, and a little bit later, I want to show you guys kind of my finished product for the most part, besides after I hook up my neutral safety switch after I remember which pins need to go where. But it's loomed all the way to the top, heat shrink everywhere down to the split, and then so there's the neutral safety, and here is my speed sensor wire that goes on the T-case right here. So that's literally it. I was not able to consolidate them into one loom because I didn't want to de-pin the 8-pin connector. It's more time than I want to spend on that. But they'll run up next to each other, and I'll kind of zip tie them together to make them look like they're one harness, and then pin them to right here. It should look good. So here in a couple minutes after I get the neutral safety taken care of, and I'm hoping I can get it right on the first go, because I had it right and I messed it up. So I'm gonna try and do that, and then we'll loom it all up nice and move up top to continue the part of it. This really is not that lengthy of an install by any means. I'm just trying to clean up Chrysler's terrible wiring, and it's just messy and crusty, so I had to repair some wires while I was at it. But it's turning out a lot better. As you can see, everything is, and once I get these lines pinned up, it'll look a lot better, and then we'll even be taking more out once we get rid of our factory fuel stuff and put an air dog on it. Our fuel lines will be gone, so I'm pretty excited for that. But it's looking better one step at a time down here. Alright guys, so I'm finally all tidied up down here. I got everything pretty loomed up. This is where the split is for the neutral safety and whatnot, and then the Anteater harness is up there. Looks pretty clean. Here is the neutral safety pins. It goes as follows. Your number 3 pin is violet and black, which that same violet and black wire goes all the way to the reverse light, so I'm going to assume that that is the reverse light wire. And then brown and yellow, and then number 2 pin, and then number 1 pin is white. I believe brown and yellow is the 12-volt power. I haven't really checked. I just went and checked to see if the truck would crank or the starter would engage, and it did, so I'm going to leave it be. I haven't checked to see if it would start in reverse or in the gears it's not supposed to, so we should be good right now. The reverse lights work as they're supposed to as well. Everything, I guess here's your after of the video I took earlier where it was very messy with all the different wires down here, but we're going to lower the truck and go up top and start working up there. But yeah, here's finished product for that. Okay guys, so I want to show you guys some notable things that I would keep an eye on if you are getting rid of your heat exchanger. As you guys know, I did in fact delete my heat exchanger whenever I put the new trans in, because I got rid of the factory lines. I got rid of all of that stuff because Well, it was sitting right there, but the factory trans cooler is literally about the size of this and a little bit taller. That's it. But my new CNR cooler will do everything that stuff did and more. But the top heat exchanger piece, let me get the light in here. You guys can see where that was right there, where I've got that fitting in the block. I'm gonna guess that's like 1/2 inch pipe thread, maybe 5/8 pipe thread. Not 100% sure. I just had one of the plugs, luckily. And the next one is on the lower water neck down there, because that's where it goes into, and it originally would have had this this style fitting. So one side goes to the heat exchanger, the other side goes to the heater core line, which is right there. So essentially, if you were to know this ahead of time, all you'd have to do is order one of these for a manual truck, because the manual trucks obviously do not have the heat exchanger. Now, with that being said, I didn't want to wait. So if you're caught in the same predicament I am, I went down to my local parts store and found a 3/4 inch MPT barb. And this is, technically it's 5/8. This paper says it's 3/4, but it fits in the 5/8 side, so I don't know if something was mislabeled. Not really sure on that, but it is 3/4 inch MPT. That you do need to know. But you just need a 5/8 barb, really, and I got a 90-degree hose from them, and I'm gonna cut it down to make it work, essentially, and obviously got to use hose clamps on each end no matter what. But this hose actually adapts to 3/4 on one end. It was a big hose like that, and this end's 3/4, which is too big, but it doesn't adapt up until you get up to here. So I just cut it off early, because this is more than enough than what I need. I only need like this much of it, because here's the piece that came off of it before. So we need about that much on going up, and then about right there. So here's the part number for it, got from Napa. No, I'm not saying this is the route you want to go. Obviously, if you think ahead of time, you go ahead and just order the factory piece. But what I'm going to do is get this in there and then kind of mock it up to see where the heater core lines need to set once I put the supports back on them to make them set right. And then cut the hose to length, and then put hose clamps back on it, and we should be good to go. As long as it doesn't leak, I'm going to vac the system down, make sure I've got no leaks, and then fill it with coolant. Obviously, I really would like to get rid of these lines and put braided AN lines there, but it's not worth me messing with at this point. It's not really a concern, because everything's still good, everything works, so there's not really any point whenever this finally gives out, like most of them do. Which I'm sure this one doesn't have a whole lot longer, because it doesn't look like it's that great. We might go ahead and just put all AN lines on it, but I need to order stuff before that. I'm not going to let this fitting keep me from driving the truck. Now, the truck won't be done today, but it will be done very soon. I think maybe next week. Once my drive shaft's here, we should be in business. But there's that. So that's what I'm doing right now. And hopefully we'll have this all back fixed up. We'll mount our alternator back up, get the belt back on, and we should be in business. Oh, and I found one of my oil leaks. The oil cooler housing, there was 2 or 3 bolts that were literally like hand tight. There was about 1/8 of an inch between the head of the bolt and the housing. So somehow those loosened up. So I got my torque wrench and torqued those all back down to 18 foot-pounds. They all look good to go now. I cleaned off with brake clean. So far, nothing's leaking yet. That'd be great if that leak got fixed. It wasn't very noticeable, but it did drive me crazy whenever that portion right there just looked kind of damp. But that's what I'm going to work on today and try and finish this up and pull it out of the shop. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a quick look. We got it trimmed down a good bit. It's not kinking or anything like that. You can kind of see the 90 and how it's doing. There is clearance about a little bit more than 1/4 inch on the back side. I could maybe trim a little bit off the bottom 90 if I wanted to, but I think that's going to work and give me enough room to bolt my supports up over here. So I think I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to tighten down the hose clamps. I've already tightened down the brass fitting into the lower water neck, so I think I'm going to roll with it, and hopefully it works. I don't see why it wouldn't, but let's see. Okay, so we got the alternator put back on. coolant back down and filled, and took valve covers off and cleaned those out because they needed cleaned. They really hadn't ran the truck with them, and yeah, there was a bunch of shit inside of them essentially. But got those cleaned, put back on, got our TPS labeled, what wire does what. Obviously you got a 5-volt supply, a sensor return, and then an actual TPS wire. Our anteater is mounted over there on the fender for now. It's mounted, it's bolted up, but that's it. I'm probably going to end up moving it once we get our panel for our fusible fusible link delete. Now I need to get the TPS or the TV lever or whatever that bolts up here to the pump and goes to the transmission. I need to take that off because with the anteater I'll be running a static TV lever. So that's our next thing to tackle. And then I think I should be pretty well ready. Got to put the static TV lever on, and then we'll be good. All right, so this is still part 4 of the 47 swap series. Obviously, all my wiring up here looks probably subpar. Everything is just hooked up. We already did the dyno stuff, so I just hooked everything up to make it work. Although TPS is not hooked up, which we just put a flat line to in the anteater to make it work. But now I have my TPS bracket and new TPS that I'm going to try, and a pigtail in order to do so. So I looked up the wiring schematic, labeled my wires already, and we're gonna hook them up and see if this can work. I think it will, but we'll have to play it out. One thing to watch for if you set one of these things on is check your throttle travel, because the TPS was stopping it and I had to readjust the bolt head or the Allen head that the TPS sets in. I had to try and tighten it down a little bit more, and now I have full throttle travel. I wouldn't have really looked for that if it wasn't for Mr. Evan Ratcliffe. He warned me about that, and that's the first thing I looked at, and sure enough, he was right. So I'm gonna go ahead and wire this stuff up, and I want to show you guys our anteater mount. I think it looks pretty good. This is obviously just our cable to plug into the laptop to tune the anteater, but it mounts up to the gauge pod. Really happy with it. I'll end up putting links in descriptions, and then these purple wires are for my tap shifter, so we'll also be getting that wired up. All right, guys, so I got it wired up and the TPS put on. This is actually it's like 90 degrees off of where it usually sits, I feel like, from what I remember, but this is how it had to be set up for what I'm doing. So the one you tap into with your anteater wire is the orange and blue wire. It's going to be the middle wire on the plug. And right now, how it's set, it reads from 0.1 volts, and then at wide open throttle, it is at 3.1 volts. So that's how it sweeps. It's not restricting my throttle travel at all. And then whenever you get in here, your anteater will turn on, and if it will focus, maybe if it focuses, it shows TPS percent right there. There's 101, 102, and then all the way off it's 0. So got a base file loaded in it. It should be good enough to just start off with, and basically just got to drive it and make adjustments all the time. So once you get it where you want it, you're good to go, but it's going to take some driving and learning. Alright guys, I am on my first drive home. Obviously the lighting is going to be very poor, but I wanted to bring you guys along for it and just kind of see how the truck drives. So I'm coming to a stop and leaving my stop here. It is in first gear, so the anteater's working. So there's definitely a hang up there. If I need to, obviously I've got a lot of work to do on my anteater tune, but I have the base file set up for the most part, which it'll get me home and shift fine. I have lockup not coming in till after it shifts into overdrive, just so it's not as violent. With having lockup and no traction bars, it is extremely violent. If you're gonna be doing this swap, you need to have traction bars, and there is no argument there. If you know what traction bars do and what purpose they serve, and the fact that they're not just for looks, that's why you need traction bars. So if you want to have nice, pretty firm lock shifts on a first gen with the 47, you need traction bars. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. So right now the tune file is set up to not lock up the converter until after overdrive comes in, and it's pretty much a flatline tune right now. My TPS is hooked up, but it's not doing a whole lot. The tune isn't, because I haven't built a curve yet. But here we're at a roundabout. It's in third still, so I would need it to downshift basically. It picks up pretty good. I'm only at 40% TPS. There's fourth, or overdrive I should say. And there's lockup. It comes in around 55. But whenever I get home, I'll show you guys my Anteater file and like just a base where you can start off with, and then you can make your own curve and tune file from there. It ought to at least get you a good baseline. Okay, so I hope you guys liked our little ride along, but I want to go ahead and show you while I'm sitting here eating dinner my tune file. And this will be just basically like a baseline to get you started. And quite frankly, the tunes the Anteater comes with, tune 2 would be a fine flatline tune file for you to go test drive the truck on. It'll do fine. The downshifts are rather aggressive for a mechanical truck. So if your truck's throttle likes to hang and you just have it on the verge of runaway, definitely be cautious, and I would probably go in on the tune file and move your 3-2 and your 2-1 downshift lower than what it's set at to start with, because it might hang and give you a little scare. But let's go ahead and look at mine. The biggest tip that I was given by Landon was the way that all of these colors are in order right now, go ahead and write them down or something, or if you have something to reference, keep that, because you have to keep them in this order. For example, my first test drive, I had a issue with it not making the 1-2 shift, and it turned out the 2-3 shift, it turned out the 3-2 downshift was causing an issue with it. So my 3-2 downshift was a lower mile an hour than what my 1-2 upshift was, and it does not like that. So it would not make the 1-2 shift. Essentially, the only reason I moved my downshift so low was because I didn't want the throttle to hang, or I don't like the really harsh downshifts with a mechanical truck just because of the RPM hanging up there. Now, you can go ahead and just take a picture of this table if you want to start out with this. I have my TPS minimum voltage and maximum voltage set in there. Landon said not to set any lower than 0.3. That's really the lowest he goes with these. And then my maximum voltage, which you can't really see. Let me make this full screen. There we go. My maximum is 3.1. Obviously we got 354s. It gives you a bunch of options to click on. We got our tire size in there. Make sure that's all accurate. The rest of it, I'm not sure. You could change your governor pressure modifier and your voltages there if you wanted, or if you're instructed to. I'm not messing with mine yet. But here is the just kind of daily driver tune, I like to call it. You'll see that I've got overdrive on after lockup. So overdrive is going to come on before lockup comes in. And that's just so I can have smooth shifts without really just being aggressive with it, without traction bars. I will have traction bars. This is the way I'm setting it up for now, and it's just really easy shifting and just a nice little daily driver tune. So now what I'm going to do is adjust, or basically try and make a curve here. So whenever I'm third gear, or for example, if you're third gear locked up and you start rolling into it, or say you're fourth gear locked up and you want it to downshift to make it third gear locked up and roll into it and just get after it, you can do that with the TPS hooked up. So depending on your throttle percentage, which is across the top, you can change what mile an hour you want it to do what at. It's a very simple, self-explanatory system. It works great. So far, my test drives have gone well, as long as I understand this and understand what's going on. And obviously, if you do this exact stuff and you have a first gen, literally just, I mean, we're very we got pretty good tech support whenever it comes to this stuff. So just call Firepunk, just call the shop, and we can definitely help you with it. But so far so good. I'm going to adjust I'm going to make some adjustments, and then I'll drive it in the morning and see what I think. But it just takes a lot of that, just like the pump tuning. Like I say with that, you gotta make adjustments, drive it, make adjustments, drive it, and do one thing at a time to really get it dialed in. That's going to be the same case with the Anteater, but once it's dialed in, it's going to be great. Because with this, you just tap a couple things on the keyboard and you're done. Versus with an RH, you have to go in and change things in the valve body. And yeah, screw that. I know people that have ran into that. I would rather do this. So I'm pretty excited, and hopefully you guys like this part of the 47 swap series. Next video is the dyno video, so hopefully that is already edited. It's coming after this one. You guys stay tuned. We got some good results, and I'm even going to be going back onto the dyno because I believe well, you'll find out. I'm not spoiling it. We'll see you guys next time on the Old School Crew. Keep kicking it old school, and peace out.